Hey kids, it's Mr. D. I'm going to talk to you today about eclipses. So we're going to talk about both solar eclipses, where the sun is hidden by the moon, and lunar eclipses, where the moon passes through Earth's shadow. So let's start with solar eclipses. Solar eclipses are where the moon passes between the Earth and the sun. So the sun hides the moon. And what you'll see here is, as you see here, the moon travels on its orbit around the Earth, and it has a shadow. And when the moon gets in this position here, where my cursor is, the shadow will be cast on the Earth. Now you need to understand the shadow structure. There's two types of shadows. There's the penumbra shadow, which is kind of like the outer shadow. It's not a complete shadow. And then there's the umbra shadow. And this is where it's darkest. Okay, so there's two types of shadows cast during an eclipse. One is the penumbra, which is the outer shadow, and then the umbra is the complete shadow. So here's a good example of it. You see the sun is over here, right? And here's the umbra shadow. So this little part of the Earth has that complete darkness. And then the outer part has, the penumbra shadow has, it's dark, but it's not completely dark. And here are a couple images. And it doesn't last a long time because the moon is orbiting the Earth. And the shadow actually travels across the Earth. We'll talk about that in a second. Inside, when you're inside the umbra shadow, though, it is quite dark. And a couple things that are interesting. Many animals just stop doing anything during that period of time. And it would make sense that the temperature drops. It's kind of interesting to think about, right? This shadow gets cast over the Earth, and then all of a sudden the temperature drops. There's just another example. One thing to remember in our phases of the moon study is that during a solar eclipse, we would have a new moon. And here are some interesting images. So here's the umbra, and then the penumbra. And see how it travels across the Earth. Here's another example, and then this one I really like. You can actually see it live, so watch, I'll follow it with my cursor, see how it travels across the Earth. And here's a great example. So this is the umbra region for a solar eclipse. And then on the outer sides, it's the penumbra. Okay. Here's an example of a total solar eclipse. You can see the moon kind of right in between there. It's quite fascinating. So when it happens, if you're near one, you should try to see one. Here's some more examples. And here's the eclipse from beginning to end. So as you can see, the moon starts to travel in front of the sun, and then eventually it covers the sun, and then it travels away. And these are just some interesting examples of solar eclipses. And there's one that I really love. I think it's coming up. It's called the diamond ring. So this is called the diamond ring. It's right after the moon, when the moon just starts to travel, either right before or right after complete eclipse, and it has a little diamond here, like a diamond ring. Now you might say to yourself, why isn't there an eclipse every month? Well, the moon orbits at an angle. So in order for the moon to create an eclipse, it has to be directly between the Earth and the sun. But since it since it orbits on this angle, it doesn't always pass in this ecliptic portion in this area where it will create an eclipse. An annular solar eclipse is really cool too, because you can see part of the sun, you can actually see the sun, the ring of the sun around the moon, and that's called an annular solar eclipse. There's some examples of that. And then partial solar eclipse. It just depends on where you are. If you're in an eclipse region, you might see a partial eclipse, or you might see a total eclipse. Now, lunar eclipses are different. Lunar eclipses are when the Earth is between the moon and the sun. And this is quite fascinating as well. And it lasts a lot longer. So you have the sun, then you have the Earth casting its shadow, and then you have the moon orbiting into Earth's shadow. So that's and those are much easier to see when they occur. You can actually see the shape of the Earth on the moon. Here's an image of them happening over a city. It's pretty cool. And then the blood moon, which is really cool, and this is fascinating to me as well, is that the moon takes an orange color or a bloodish color because the Earth's atmosphere filters out the light. So here's the Earth's atmosphere. This is quite fascinating. Sunlight passes through Earth's atmosphere, and it acts like a magnifying glass almost. And it lets back through. It filters out all the light except for the reddish light and creates a blood red moon. Quite fascinating. Here's an example of a total lunar eclipse, blood red moon, and then the eclipse leaves. Here are some lunar eclipse types, and this will be probably the end of our discussion today because there are a couple. You have the moon passing through the penumbra shadow of the Earth, so it's a penumbral eclipse. Here's a total lunar eclipse because the moon is in the umbral shadow. Partial, meaning it's a little bit in the umbral shadow and a little bit out. And then finally, partial penumbral, which means that it's kind of half covered by the outer shadow. And that's it. So great job. Hopefully this helped you get your websites ready and gave you enough information so that you have an understanding of eclipses. Great work. Keep up the great work.